I was working as a prospector's assistant in central Malibu one summer. We were doing a helicopter-assisted magnetic anomaly investigation. Best summer of my life. There's nothing like the ringing in your ears dissipating after the helicopter's dropped you off and you slowly increase the volume of bugs taking its place. You know for sure that you're in the middle of nowhere. It was the last day of our camping. There was a little piece of the property close enough to the road that we didn't need a helicopter. It was a low priority target that was saved until the end of the day. We'd kicked so much ass during the high priority targets and we decided to do this one just to ease out of the day. At around 9 AM, we heard yelling in the bush. Odd, nobody else should be out here. We kept on grabbing samples and it's in the back of our mind. Then, at around 11, we hear it again, a little closer this time. We call back but it's silent. Now, through our travels of this 30-kilometer piece of property, we come across many pieces of animal evidence. Deer, moose, rabbit droppings, things everywhere, a few carcasses here and there, bear tracks, bear feces. We saw some other weird stuff, but nothing prepared us for what happened next. After noon, we're up in an old blast hole from the 80s. Prospector Dave then told me that he used to have a blasting license and that he would blow stuff up in the middle of forest while drinking beer. That was his favourite pastime. That was until they changed the laws, of course. Now we were facing due west with our GPSs on some rocks getting the more precise UMT. Then we hear an earth-shattering, bone-chilling howl. I looked at Dave and he turned white and almost green. I picked up the GPS and put it in my belt and unclipped my bear spray. Then at around 9 o'clock, facing due west, another wolf. Then at 10, another and another, all the way to our 4 o'clock. Dave calmly said, "We need to leave, but you can't run. If you run, you die." We left most of our sampling stuff there. We also carry these modified steel sledgehammers for breaking rocks and stuff. So I decided that it'd be best if we armed ourselves with these and our bear spray as we walked. Now it was the most longest walk of my entire life. Neither of us said a word. I didn't hear anything, but I'm positive they followed us back to the road and towards the truck. We eventually made it out of there, but it's chilling to think of how close we come to dying in such a horrific manner. I was camping with a bunch of city dwellers that had never done hiking before. Needless to say, some things didn't go so well, like 2 people only bringing 1 small bottle of water, several people not bringing enough food, and a couple that were carrying an 8-man tent between them. It was like herding cats, let me tell you that. Anyway, we finally make camp. Maybe at 2 or 2:30, we're up in the cliffs and have a really beautiful view. We now have ample time to set up camp, cook dinner, and tell ghost stories. But no, these numbnuts get the bright idea to go down to the water. "It's just right there," they plead, 30 minutes tops. This is bullcrap. It's easily 2 hours down there, I know this. One other guy knows this, but we feel obligated to go down with these idiots just to keep them out of trouble. So we finally make it down to the beach, just as the sun is setting. Now we have to hike back into the deepening dark. There's a dim moonlight and the fog is rolling in fast, especially being near the water it's much worse. I only have a flashlight on me, and the batteries give out after a while. Of course we got lost. I managed to take a spill and hurt my ankle quite badly, so now it's really dark. The fog has set in fully, we're lost, cold, hungry, and I'm injured. Then, the other competent hiker pulls me aside and tells me something hushed, saying, "I don't want to freak you out, but something is following us back there. It fades into view then fades back into the fog. I've never seen anything like it, seriously." We then continue talking for a little bit, and I suddenly catch sight of a ghostly white shape, maybe 3 feet tall, moving silently but quickly along the side of the trail that we're on. Every single hair on my body stood on end, and I've never felt fear like it. Now this thing didn't stay visible for long and disappeared into the brush almost as quick as I realised it was there. I caught fleeing sight of it once again, and then again, before it eventually disappeared for good. Now to this day, I have no idea what the hell it was. I never saw it for long enough to clearly make out what it was. It didn't move like any animal I've seen, and it was in complete silence. I can't tell you how relieved I was when we got back above the fog and the visibility was better. After midnight, we called a halt. We rested for about half an hour, pulled what little food and water we had left, and tried to figure out where we were. Now later that night and early morning, I was woken up by something underneath the tent pushing up hard into my back. I screamed and scrambled out of my tent and sleeping bag. As I jumped outside, I could see my sleeping bag moving in a rhythmic motion. I punched it and it never moved again. Now I don't know if them two events are linked, but it sure of hell scares the life out of me. I really don't like thinking of it even to this day. I was working with endangered shorebirds one summer and living on a remote island off of Cape Cod. Now one 12-hour day of monitoring, I plopped down into the sand and took a quick nap. I then noticed a bottle laying next to my head. It was fogged up and obviously from the sea. It was weathered badly. I usually don't think much of bottles because they're literally everywhere on the island, but I decided to open it up thinking maybe there's something inside it. The main reason was earlier that summer, I found a message in a bottle from a team of people researching local currents, asking me to email the coordinates I found it at. Sure enough, this one had a message too. I pulled out a wet folded piece of paper from the bottle and carefully unfolded it. It immediately began to tear apart with the wind, but I managed to hold it together and read it. It was from a woman. She addressed it to the universe. She was asking to become cancer-free and hoping for a sign of remission during her doctor's appointment that was scheduled 2 days after she wrote the letter. It was one of the saddest and most beautiful things that I've ever read. A letter to the universe. A message from somebody that's desperate to grasp onto the life as little as she has left. And little does she know, it's sitting in my unlikely hands now. We're in the geology field camp in Colorado. One day, we're out doing a field test which involves wandering around by yourself, checking out outcrops in an effort to figure out the underlying geological structures in the area. So we're on top of this mesa, and I'm wandering around the edge. I'm trying to find a way to look at the horizontal layers that I'm currently standing on top of. I find a small nearly vertical crevasse that looked like it will do well, so I decide that I'm going to go down there. Now I can see a little ledge about 8 feet down, and it looks like I can scramble down to it and get a good picture of what's inside. So I began chimneying down without too much of a problem. I jumped down to the ledge. I then landed in a mass of needles and white things, which turned out to be lots of elks, deers, bighorns, sheep bones, etc. Fur, everything. Even cat bodies. Needless to say, I scrambled the hell out of there as fast as I possibly could. It turns out that I climbed into an active mountain lion den. I work in the outdoor field and lead trips on a regular basis. I once had a trip to the top of Mount St. Sterling in NC. It's a tough climb to get to the top of and about 6 miles from the nearest road. I was leading a group of 8 middle school kids and we had a co-instructor with us. So we're camping out at the top of the mountain and it was a really beautiful night with a full moon. The kids and the other instructor chose to go to bed early that night. I decided that I would just go asleep in my hammock and just enjoy the scenery and everything. I decided to stay up reading my book until about 11:30. I turned off my headlamp to settle in for the night. Everything around me was rather bright from the moon and the position I was in meant I could see everything. I could see down the trail that we just hiked in. I was watching down there when suddenly I saw something move. Bears are common in the area, so I perked up. As it got closer, I could see it was a person. They were in the middle of nowhere, and there was no reason for them to be on this trail. They had no hiking gear and no headlamp. I just froze watching this person move close to our camp. They arrived at the top of the mountain where we were and just stopped. I watched as they approached. It was obvious they were just surveying us. I really could only see the outline of him. He stood there for what seemed to be like 30 minutes, but it may have only been 10. He then sat down, turned, faced a tree, faced our camp. He was now sitting up in a way that I knew he wasn't trying to sleep. He just sat there staring at us. I had no idea what to do. I decided to wait it out. I waited just staring at the man while he heard me at my camp. He was staring back now. This went on until about 4 in the morning. Then, he stood up, took a moment to look around again, then went back down the trail. To this day, I still have no idea who the hell he was or what he wanted. I'm forever paranoid that I'm going to see him again, or that maybe he's following me. There was a group of teens that hadn't been heard from after their scheduled return time from a camping trip. A good friend and I know the area very well, and one of the search and rescue guys that we're friends with called us in to assist in the search. Him and I head out in the direction that the teens had been lost in. We'd been hiking for the most of the day and we'd not seen anything. We get to about 40 kilometers into the woods. At this point we're starting to notice odd things. There's sticks carved like spears into the ground, weird carvings in the trees. There was a child stuffed animal that was hanging from a tree. It was noosed up. This place wasn't near any roads. It wasn't on the regular trails that people would go to get to the area. The really eerie thing was that everything was freshly carved. Somebody had been there within a couple of hours of us and made those things. Mind you, we're looking for teens. We kept on hiking and eventually made our way to the camp. We got there by nightfall, still kind of on edge by what we'd seen, but we eventually settled down and went to go to sleep. We then get up at sunrise hoping that we can cover more ground before it gets too hot. We pack up the gear and get ready to go out when I notice a bit of shirt that had caught on a small tree and ripped along. There's some shoe prints as well. We were thinking, great, maybe we're close by the teens when a radio call comes. The teens have been found about 20 kilometers east of us. They're calling everybody back. Suddenly, all of those weird things that we had seen from the day before come flooding back into my mind. We wasted no time hiking out of those woods. A couple of years ago, I went camping with my brother and an old roommate of mine. This was in one of the national forests in Oregon. We're pretty high up, kind of near a ghost town. Not really a dangerous area, but there were lots of black bears and cougars. I set up my hammock with a tarp to keep the rain out. Then I got pretty drunk and went to bed. Well, since I drank my weight in beer, I woke up in the middle of the night and had to pee. I lifted up the tarp to peek out with a flashlight. Just when I saw two eyes staring back at me. They're about 20 feet away. I was using one of those stupid $2 hardware store LED lights and it didn't do much of a beam, so I couldn't really see what was behind the eyes. All I could see is that they were far apart. My first instinct was to turn the light off and stay where I was, but it was close, and then I wouldn't be able to see it. Now we had 3 guns, but mine was in the truck. I came to the conclusion that the only thing I could do was stay perfectly still and keep the light on so I could see it. So I draped my other leg out of the hammock and was ready to bolt if I needed to. I stayed in that position for what felt like forever until I noticed that the eyes had not moved at all. So I took a chance. I slowly got out of the hammock and started moving, keeping about 20 feet between us. I was moving towards the truck and whatever this was didn't move at all. Once I got to the side, I saw it. These were binoculars. I have no idea why they were there or who was using them. I just stayed in my truck and locked the doors and passed out. When I woke up the next morning, they were gone. I'm a seasonal ranger for my local forest district. Despite the fact that I live in a fairly suburban area, the forest preserves still make up 12% of the country, with much of the property being heavily wooded, not far out into the wilderness but pretty secluded in some places. Now, being a seasonal employee, I've been on the job for a bit over a month now, and in my short time, these are some of the crazy things that have already been found by me. I found a dead man in a tree. The rest of the rangers say they find about one suicide a year, so here was one for the year. Now, when we go around opening the parks each day, we drive through to make sure that everything's alright. I'm on this instance driving through and had just lost sight of the road when I saw a human hanging from a tree. He clearly hung himself. I called the cops and everybody come over, though it took about an hour for anybody else to show up. The only thing they found there other than the guy was a ladder. It took them a long time to cut him down. So I was in shock just staring at this dead guy for at least an hour. One of the other really nasty things I saw was a headless deer. Normally when a pack of coyotes take down a deer, they leave bite marks all over the body, along with torn flesh everywhere, but the head was cleanly sliced off, meaning that this is something that a guy did, not an animal. We still haven't figured this one out yet. These are the two things that have happened, and I've only been working here for 5 weeks. God knows what's going to come next. I got a special wilderness permit to go into an area in the mountains in California where they hadn't allowed foot traffic in 20 years. There were no trails. It was myself and 2 other Marines, and we did it in exchange for seeing if it was a rare kind of trout in the streams up there. I guess the Forest Service didn't have anybody who wanted to do anything about it. Anyway, we hiked there for about 2 days with no trails, using a map and a compass. On the second day, we walked around this huge cliff to find a cabin with a lawn and solar power near it, as well as a washer and dryer. The whole 9 yards really. It was literally built into the rock face of the cliff. You couldn't see it from above though, so it had gone unnoticed for years. We talked to the guy that lived there, and he said that we were the first people that he had seen in 14 years. He was a retired helicopter pilot and flown all of his equipment in by helicopter. He was squatted on federal land, and he knew that he wasn't meant to be there, but he didn't seem worried. He said he hiked out here every 2 weeks for supplies, and he'd always go a different route than the one that we had came in by and showed us how to use it. We then get back to the route and go back to the trail that was beaten down, so walking was easier. All in all, it was pretty cool. It was just really weird to see a guy that was out there living in complete isolation like that. It's kinda cool but kind of scary at the same time if you think he could be doing anything out there and he could have easily just been lying to us. I've always been drawn to the wild. It seems like a second home to me, and I generally know my neighbours out there. I'm not afraid to go deep into the woods, into the dark, into the unknown. I love all of that. So one sunny weekend afternoon, I dirt biked up to an old mining road. It gained a couple of 1,000 feet from the valley floor below, and the ridges kind of cascaded inwards and upwards. When the road gave out near the bottom of the high basin, I put on my backpack and started off cross country towards a ridge. It was still heavily forested, old, and growth everywhere, fading into another 1,000 feet or so. The wind blows near the top. About 20 minutes in, and about half a mile out from me, near the tree line, I hear this thumping sound. It was very odd, so I stopped to listen carefully. It sounded like a big, solid branch that was being whacked against a solid tree. I use the term because it's kind of powerful, if that makes sense. One or both of the pieces of the wood were obviously hard and dry. It had true bass to it. The wood resonated and ran on impacts of dry wood. I couldn't get over the power though. It sounded like somebody was swinging a massive metal post even. Weird, right? But it gets better. This sounded like they were trying to communicate. The thumping had a very complex and well-defined pattern. Here's the weirdest part. The thumping signal occasionally become very rapid like a drummer could do if they were noodling around with a stick, and I swear it just sounded exactly like they were going at it with a drumstick, very light at times. I listened for around maybe 5 minutes, just fascinated with the sound, this code and the power of it. Then, the drumming suddenly stopped, and I kind of woke up to the fear of not knowing what was going on. I had my pistol, bear spray and knife. I really only feared cougars, and even then, I figured they'd have a bad day trying to take me. Still, the silence come over me as I stared into the forest ahead, and it seemed loaded with fear. It's a really weird feeling. I turned around on my hill and left the valley. To this day, I still have no idea what that experience was or what it meant. I've read stories about some of the native people here and stuff around the valleys, and I truly get it now. For several years, I worked out in the forests of a country that experienced a genocide in the not so distant past. Several times I was out in the forest, I would find skulls. Once I wasn't watching where I was going and I stumbled onto something soft. I looked down and it looked to be a very old sweater that had been lying there forever. I poked it with my foot and dug around the vegetation a little bit. Sure enough, most of the skeleton was gone, but it was clear that there were bones inside the sweater. Somehow that freaked me out more than the skulls did, but it was just crazy to be able to walk around and find human remains right there. I mean, if you've ever seen a dead body you'd know what I mean, but it's just really creepy, especially knowing what took place for them to get there. The scariest experience I had as a backcountry park ranger in Washington State was being stalked by a cougar for at least a day and a half. I was hiking up an unpopular trail up to an old shelter that had a creepy being watched feeling to it. I had seen fairly fresh cougar scratches and scrape marks all along the trail, but that was pretty common up here, so I wasn't really worried. That night I camped at the shelter. It only had 3 walls and a roof. I felt uneasy all night and hardly slept. At one point, I arranged my emergency foil trap around my sleeping bag, just so at least I could hopefully hear something if anybody approached me. The next day, I found fresh scratch marks all along the trail that I'd hiked upon. About a mile past the shelter, I found 3 mostly eaten deers in some dense bushes off the trail. Cougars will often keep their kills stashed away throughout the territory for later snacking. Now, a cougar won't usually target a human, but where I'm 5 foot tall, 100 pounds, and not really that big, and at least 30 miles away from anybody else, so there's a pretty high chance that they were going to go for me. I had to get out of there fast. The next 2 hours of hiking through the dusk in a dense forest was like hell, really. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I did eventually make my way out of there and not get attacked, but I could almost sense that they were near me the whole time. It was truly a horrible feeling. I'm a wildland firefighter with the Forest Service. Now this isn't my story, but that of an old supervisor of mine. So in 2004 or so, Hell's Canyon area in the middle of Idaho, his crew had been working all day on an emergency incident that had happened, and they were going to be working through the night as well. Being the assistant superintendent of the crew, second in charge effectively, he was out ahead scouting on an ATV or such. Now he was working his way down a logging road that clearly had not been used in some time when a bobcat or lynx appears in the middle of the road. It doesn't run away like they usually would. The thing stands there for a good 10 seconds, then screams at him and scampers up a tree about 5 feet off the road. He finds this odd, but not particularly. About half a mile or so down the road, he then finds a small cabin, also odd, and this is federal land and no private structures should be there. Upon investigation, all the windows had been boarded and shut up, and somebody did a really good job in so. The door had been punched out and scratched and secured to a hole drilled into the frame. Somebody didn't want anything getting in or out. He decided to peer through the hole in the door but couldn't see anything in the house. This left him kind of unsettled, so he hops onto his ATV and heads up the road again. Well, this is where things get real interesting. Right where the bobcat had been, there stands a Native American woman in badly tattered nightingale and bare feet. She just stands there, yells at him, asks if she needs any help, and she screams at him again. He then heard the same scream as the cat had made, and she then climbs up a tree. Obviously he nopes out of there as fast as he can. Now completely baffled by what he's seen, he asks around a little to find out, and a local Native American hears them talking and tells him that they've just seen a Pumbaa, in effect a skin changer. I live in northeast Oklahoma and consider myself a camping and fishing enthusiast. One spring night, me and two friends decided to go fishing. It's around midnight. We're going to a place that was once maintained and a very nice camping area. Now it's pretty remote and nobody really goes there. No one really knows it's there, to be honest. As we approach the turnoff from our spot, we see another vehicle slowly turning out of it. It proceeded to go out the way that we come in. We pass him and a friend says how he figured nobody else would be around. We get to our spot, we get our gear and begin to prepare. As we do chat and get a few beers down us, we notice an unspoken uneasiness. Something's just not right. Usually I'm a trooper and fishing until the sun comes up, but I'm the first to crack. I explain to my friends how I feel and that we should leave, and I just have this really bad feeling. They all agreed and we load up. While slowly driving through the old campsite, we notice some brightly glowing embers in an area where nobody has been. My friend driving stops without even thinking and goes for a look. He's startled, telling us to come and look. What he saw were the remains of 3 crosses made out of wood that would stand about 12 inches if upright. They had been burned thoroughly, along with a small campfire. And to make it even better, they're all lying upon freshly turned soil. It resembled a freshly dug grave. We all freaked out and got the hell out of there fast. Now thank you, sweet baby Jesus, we're all home free. When we approached the exit of an old campground, we noticed a vehicle parked on the side of the road. When we passed it, we all realised that it was the exact same car that we had passed on the way before. Nobody's in the car this time. They had doubled back and were likely watching us, waiting to do God knows what to us. We've never went back there since. It's just too dangerous knowing that they're out there and they were actively hunting us. According to experts, there's no such thing as black mountain lions. One day, while out with my dogs hunting mushrooms deep in the woods of northern Humboldt Country, California, my dogs called to scent and took off ahead of me. Before I could call them back, they were already out of sight and I heard the most horrific screaming sound of any dogs that I've ever heard before, followed with barking and squealing. By the time I got over to the hill, they had 3 mountain lions in a tree. There was a mother, and one of the cubs was jet black. One of my dogs had a severely mauled leg and shoulder and puncture wounds to her neck, so I didn't stick around to observe. And I sure as hell didn't think to take any pictures. I scooped up my dog, slung her over my shoulders and hiked the 3 miles back to where I left my car and rushed her to the vets. While she was in surgery, they had to amputate her leg. My vet's husband, who is a Forest Service worker, come into the office. He heard about the attack and wanted to ask about the location and details. When I told him about the black mountain lions, he told me that there were no black mountain lions. He refused to believe me and said I was crazy. After my baby girl was settled and resting back home, I proceeded to start making calls to park departments, colleges and cat sanctuaries, anyone who thought I might have some validation. Everybody I spoke to had the exact same reaction. They told me that there was no such thing as black mountain lions and I was crazy. But to this day, I still know exactly what I saw, and I know exactly what's out there.